how I like to do these things is maybe Meg and Rachel, you guys are cheering it. So if people have questions, etc., then they maybe pump it into the chat and hop me at any time. If there's something that comes up, we can chat later, etc. But the brief that I've got from Meg, I think, is just a little bit of an informal run through how I've ended up and gone about my practice as a chiropractor. Is that along the lines?
Yeah, basically just like how you've gotten to where you are and what kind of things you did while you're a student and when you graduated to get to where you are now, kind of thing, just to give us some idea how to navigate everything that's going to be coming our way, basically.
Yeah, so I've put a few slides together to be able to have a little bit of a theme that I think will give some I don't like using the word inspiration, because I think if you inspire somebody, they say it, that happens. It's not really my intention, but I would like to maybe nudge some directions for things for you guys that I have found to have served me well. And can I get some feedback in the chat box around anybody? I would assume that most people in here has heard of Back to Roots. But I don't know everybody by name that I can see across the tile here. Can people just pump in what it is that people's associate with either myself or Back to Roots? I'd like to have a little bit of a grasp of what sort of message is getting across or getting out. It also helps me check if the chat function works. I'm pumping into hint. Test. Joseph, yes, I've heard. Movement and play. Paul's dodgy humor. Yeah, that's reciprocated back, I think, Paul Allen. Evidence-based functional medicine, the Apex Chiro Physio, rehab-based. Okay, so the general gist of the folks who are in here is that it is rehab-based. So that's good, first and foremost, because that's what I like to have that as an expectation for people who are going to come and see me. And that is really the peephole you guys are looking through there at it raining outside. And this is a cartoon that's been remade 100 times from, talking about social media, science-based practice, and lots of different versions of that. But we're looking through the peephole where people see me and Back to Roots in rehab and play and trying to make things fun is an improvising and looking pretty fluid in how we go about it, is really looking through that peephole. And what I want to do is give you a look over the wall as to what really is the roots of my confidence in prescribing exercise from where I am today, right the way back to where it started, because it really starts with you and nobody's going to do it for you. So if that's something that I can encourage that you guys take from it today, it will be that. Now, I have spoken around the field of exercise, adherence, and movement. And, I did a TED Talk type thing at the ECU in 2018. You can see that 15-minute chat around me proposing the idea that play is really where we all ultimately end up when it comes to exercise rehabilitation. I'm aware that link that I've put there on the top left is only going to be if you have access to my drive. But if you YouTube Luke Davis chiropractic, you will see it will be the top thing. But this is a field that I'm passionate about. So, I mean, that is me there. I'm the founder of a company called Back to Roots, and most of you will know me in some way as a lecturer at University of South Wales. I now teach the 4th years, something called exercise rehab protocols, and that's all online. It's the nature of the world that we live in at the moment. And I am teaching clinical management in year 3. And I think Louisa is in here, and anybody else who's in year 3 may have just had me because I've just driven back from that, which is functional management. And again, I put a great amount of pride in trying to get across into the curriculum things that I think help us deliver what the current guidelines tell us all as healthcare professionals we should be trying to do. Me and Paul made a pain clinic, which is an online 12-week self-management program for a company called Results Wellness Lifestyle, to empower people to be able to self-manage. The book is got chapters that are each week that is focused on a different theme, like hurt doesn't equal harm, modifiable factors, stress, all different things working through what we think is important in a program. And that's undergoing ORCA approval for the NHS. All of these things is what we are trying to get into and have shifted the curriculum in the Welsh Institute of Chiropractic in the last few years. We won't play my ID game because we'll probably run out of time. But just give me a time check. Are we got until you wanted about half an hour and then time for questions? Is that the format that you wanted?
Yeah, it's up to you really. I'm happy with whatever. It's nothing. It's just however long it goes on for and how it flows. But yeah, something around like 30 to 40 minutes.
Super. Kick me off if you run out of time. My roots really started in terms of exercise and training in rugby. I'm from Wales. I live about an hour and a half from the Welsh Institute of Chiropractic up here in mid Wales, just above the Brecon Beacons. And rugby was my earliest immersion in training and exercise. And I used to play for Wales. And if I was to share some of the names of the team when I was playing, some of those guys have gone on to become some of the most well-known players in the world, some of them arguably some of the best players of all time, like Sam Warburton, Lee Halfpenny, Dan Bigger. A lot of these boys have become British and Irish Lions, and that was the same Welsh side that I was part of as a schoolboy. But really, what was the most interesting thing for me to look back on now was that really started my early mentorship in training under strength coaches, because this is a quote that my earliest strength coach from the age. So I've tried to divide my sort of timeline in the things that I think have been pertinent in getting to the point where I prescribe exercise and do it as a chiropractor. So from the age of 15 to 19 was when I was playing academy level rugby, international level rugby, and my strength coach then instilled a quote into me that really stuck with me. And he said, if you're going to do something, why don't you do it as well as you can? And that was something that he lived by and breathed himself. His name's Ian Jeffries, and he's actually now head of strength and conditioning in the University of South Wales, I believe. But this is a text that's actually not pubbed yet. It's not published yet. It's Advanced Personal Training, Science to Practice, and it's available from November 15th next month. And I've pulled out some of the authors here in the chapters. And if any of you are unfamiliar, as I look through this list here, I mean, Brad Schoenfield, Alan Aragon, Nick Tumanello, Eric Helms, these are some of the biggest names in evidence-based personal training today. And chapter 9 is written by Ian Jeffries. So my earliest 4 years of training was immersion in academy level strength and conditioning under Ian Jeffries, which really was my first early mentorship in being confident under a barbell, in being able to have periodizing and programming to be able to go through as an athlete. Now, from there, my next early mentorship was from the age of 19 to 21. And this is where I went to what was called UWIC. It is now called Cardiff Metropolitan University, where I did sport and exercise science degree. And there I was really there because I didn't know what I wanted to do in my career. It was still all about being a professional rugby player. So I was there and I trained and learned under someone called David Watts. Di Watts, again, another really highly well-respected strength and conditioning coach that I learned, and it was a professional training environment where I trained under him for the 3 years that I was there doing my sport and exercise science degree. And this is what really borne out my journey into becoming a chiropractor, because this is where I had my first shoulder reconstruction. That's me in the bottom corner there, where I dislocated my shoulder, and this is the top left, so the sort of scar tissue. I played this with the first, if anyone's here in the first, so I got the guys to team an observation game on on each other the other day, where I gave each other a minute to look at each other and then turn around, change 5 things, and then try and spot what was different. Some people change an earring, some people put their glasses on backwards. 5 things to train observation, and then I take my shirt off to get you see that my shoulders are held together by scar tissue, because this is something that really took me through the path of being the patient, year after year, to go through reconstruction. I had 3 on my left, 2 on my right. And also, when I look back, is the exercise physiologist that was my teacher is a chap called Daniel Newcomb, who is, I'm just moving these bars around so you can see. So he's an author of The Constraints-Led Approach, which is a text that's absolutely fundamental to me today and back to roots in a non-linear pedagogy approach to exercise prescription, which is really amazing to see that one of my earliest teachers in UIC there, Daniel Newcomb, is actually the author of that book there. Highly recommend, and it's part of the essential reading for all of my courses.
Is it got something to do with climbing, or is that just the cover photo?
Cover photo is climbing, but ultimately what it is, it's about taking a constraints-led approach to movement. So rather than saying bend down like copying me, it is to create a task where you pick something up from the floor. So the task means that you bend down, but you're going to have to solve that in a way, the fact that you, Meg, are going to bend down to the floor different to me. And that is normal and to be expected, because there isn't a correct way to do it. There'll be a better way for you and there'll be a better way for me. And that's even before we even talk about the fact that it hurts. So that is an image there talking about climbing, because that is really about getting from A to B. And again, how could me and you possibly climb a wall the same when I'm 6'3" and you're probably not 6'3"? Yeah. And we all have different anthropometry and different body proportions. Yeah. Constraints-led approach accounts for that. And that's really the alternative to a imitation or a copy me, or this is how everybody should squat, this is how everybody should bend down. So that's an amazing book, and the approach that is really driving in a contemporary approach to rehab. And again, one of my early mentors, Daniel, was in there. So that takes us on to my next early mentors, which was from the age of 22 to 26, which is when I was going through the Welsh Institute of Chiropractic, because this is when I was under a chap called Rhys Shawnee, who is a chartered physiotherapist. He has done lots of really high profile. He's done about 3, but you'll kill me now, 3 Olympic Games, Team GB in swimming, and he is a lecturer at Cardiff. He was my physio at Everest and also head of strength and conditioning. An amazing exposure for me early doors as I was going through WIOC of what it is to be a physio, because it blew my mind in the fact that I was constantly having my shoulders reconstructed, constantly going through the process of being injured. Yet day 1 from surgery, I was training hard around my problem. And I was training and learning under Rhys to be able to do that. I was absolutely blown away, because I'd seen a lot of physios up to that point. And I was like, no physio has ever enabled me to keep training, because one of the biggest things that I think I can empathize with clients or patients is the fact that when you're injured, when you're hurt and you can't do something you enjoy, is the psychological turmoil. That was by far the hardest thing, getting not to clinical depression, but absolutely in low mood and all of the things when you can't do something that's as important to you as exercise and training was to me and still is today. So Rhys showed me a way of being able to adapt strength and conditioning around a problem, which again, retrospectively, I now look back on how fortunate I was, because what I would do when I was playing for Everest was I would go to training early, because I was so fascinated by Rhys's thoughts, processes, and how he held himself and how he went about himself. I would stay afterwards, and then ultimately we would train in CrossFit Caerphilly, which is just down the road there from Wyok, where I'd meet him at 6 a.m, and he would force me to make the sessions with him, and he would not let me plan. It would make me anxious as fuck. I would be absolutely dreading it because he was one of my idols. But we would be meeting at 6 a.m. at CrossFit Caerphilly, and he would not let me plan, and we would work on a variety of things. And again, it is incredible to look back on how that set me in the mindset of what actually happens in real life of, oh, you have all these things planned. No, you've got to be able to adapt on the spot. Incredible process. Back then, it was really, Kelly Starrett was something I was really interested in and really, fascinated by Kelly Starrett. And this is before social media really was blown off, and it was the Supple Leopard that I was really influenced by at that time. And again, this is just to illustrate some of the impact that rugby had on me and as my identity in going through my studies, through my training and conditioning, and my sculpting through becoming a chiropractor, being influenced by a physio. So that's something that probably adds a little bit or fills a few dots in terms of how Back to Roots now looks today. Doesn't tell the full picture. We'll get to that now. What I also then did was to be able to transition from when I played to the pitch side assistant. So that's me and Reese there in the background, where I did a Lubus medical training to be able to upskill me in acute trauma management, to be able to be pitch side assisting with Reese. Again, an amazing experience for me to go through. So I'm still all in your guys' position at this point, still a student at the Welsh Institute of Chiro. And then when it come to graduating, you needed then 300 hours in clinic to be able to graduate. I don't know if that's changed now since the pandemic. I think Paul's in here, so maybe you could pump in what the number of requirements is. But I used to spend too long with clients, or longer than I was meant to, because I had a very exercise biased approach to how I wanted to work with people. I actually used to move the treatment bench to the side when I was in my clinical year in Wyok and get straight to the things I felt most comfortable with, which was moving somebody. And that was that it was in that final year then where I didn't have enough hours to be able to graduate. So David Byfield, who I was treating because he wanted me to be able to help him keep him playing tennis, and he arranged that I put on workshops for the rest of my year group to help give them the confidence in prescribing exercise. So at that point, I was already having my peers come into me because they sort of saw me as someone who seemed to be a bit more confident with exercise than other people. And what a lot of people, again, if we take, and we're looking through that peephole here is, I'm not a personal trainer, I'm not a strength and conditioning coach, but by the time I graduated when I was 26, I have 11 years strength and conditioning experience under various, what have now gone on to become elite level coaches. And I cannot emphasize how fortunate I am now looking back on that exposure, because that is strength and conditioning 101. That is things that I now take for granted when I'm helping or when I'm coaching and seeing you students working with people when you haven't had that experience. Okay, so that is something that I've got some suggestions and things to be able to build on that as an idea, because I think that is an important point from here is, again, it starts with us. And this is, by 26, 11 years of experience under barbells in particular, that type of training. So let's move on to my next point of mentors, where I moved to London to take an associate job in St. Paul's, where I met St. Paul McCambridge, who was to change the route forward for me from that point onwards. I sometimes wonder whether for the better or the worse, definitely the harder. And it exposed me to moving in different ways from my very linear strength and conditioning background, 10 plus years of just being about strength, power, and all the things that we tend to associate with gyms. And all of a sudden, Paul starts saying, hey, look, what if people don't like going to the gym? And yeah, I was a little bit fucked at that point. So then it started for me to be able to think and be exposed to literature to be able to say, yeah, I'm going to need to try and upskill the things that I am able to offer somebody. That's a picture of me dressed as a conventional chiropractor. You won't see one of those ever again. I do work as a chiropractor proudly, but probably not like the vast majority. As you'll see when you come to class with me, I'm often wearing joggers and wearing a t-shirt because I'm passionate about moving. And in a shirt, chinos, I found I couldn't move. So this was research that helped me to be able to take or heed action, which is the European Spine Journal. You know, this is where it tells us there's no, this is in from some of our other lectures, our self-management lectures, where there is no consistency in the recommendations of favoring one particular modality of exercise for spinal pain, aches and pains. So hence what the European Spine Journal recommends here is that we argue that the choice may rely on patient preferences and the important one at the bottom here, therapist experience. So this is something that we try and get across to you guys, is the things that you're comfortable and you have experience with are going to guide what you can offer and what you can do to help make rehabilitation a little bit more interesting, to help broaden the scope around what patient preferences you could help someone work towards. Okay, so from age 26 to 31 now, so I'm just postgraduate, and I have a big shift in my approach to try and upskill or upregulate my versatility in exercise. Because I appreciate that not everybody likes training in the gym, so I shifted towards learning body weight training, and then my mentors had to go much further afield because I didn't have access to the type of coaches that I wanted. So I trained under just Christopher Summers of Gymnastic Bodies. He's the US national gymnastics coach. Ida Portal, trained with him in terms of mixing together a lot of play and gymnastic strength training. Phoenix Nation, I had exposure with them. Darren was my most recent gymnastic strength coach out of Australia. He also trained under Christopher Summers. And Gold Medal Bodies, GMB, big influence through this period, fitness FAQs, calisthenics. And I would say from this 5-year period, I probably gained, well, I could still hit a 60-second handstand. So that is something that I took from that period, some other skills that you can see here. But what I really learned was just how hard and how much it would take to achieve some of the other things that I did set my mind on. I trained planche absolutely relentlessly. My body shape's not best suited to it, but I could have achieved it. But the time frame to be able to achieve things like a one-arm chin up, a planche, hollow back press, things, I really had an appreciation in going through that journey as to how long that would take. And the
how long did it take?
What now?
Like a one-arm pull-up or front lever?
Well, I still can't do either of those, and that's what I was saying. It is that my training for a handstand, you know, really I searched for a lot of coaches, and I'm pretty comfortable with being able to coach those sort of things myself. And I've got, you know, getting something is always harder than keeping it. But yeah, a planche, planche is the one I really trained hard in 2019, and I ultimately gave myself repetitive strain injuries, golfer's elbow in both arms, which is a risk of really high load. And I'm also not the best suited for it. I've got long arms and I'm heavy. So, but I like a challenge, and I really wanted to learn a different way of training to being in a gym and barbell work. And I can definitely say in that process of the 5 years, I learned what it would take. Some people, you asked about a front lever there or a one-arm chin, depends on the person. A general rule of thumb will be if someone hasn't got much strength training for a one-arm chin, then it's at least 18 months of really dedicated training to that. If you've already got 15 strict 2-arm pull-ups, they say 6 to 12 months. But again, that's not accounting for the fact that life happens, the fact that you get niggles, you can get injuries. But again, that is really what born out the Back to Roots brand, is that in this process, I've been in the squiggle the entire time. This idea of something being a straight line of success has not been the case for me in any facet of life. And the more successful people I meet, the more I realize that they are the ones who can embrace the journey of the squiggle and the failures. And, you know, people like Thomas Edison, I haven't failed. I found 10,000 ways that don't work. And that's really a mindset that I think sets people aside who persist and ultimately will find a way. So big shift to bodyweight training, which at this point, my profile on an awareness for people is bigger now with social media and the courses and things we start doing. And this is really what people associate often with me is bodyweight training. And then again, being aware of research like, you know, the biggest drivers of exercise adherence, which I'm passionate about, is they enjoyed it. San Angel's research. So again, my pursuit was to find interesting ways to be able to train and move, which led me down the route of exploring dance, the arts, and things that have massively influenced me in the last 5 years, like capoeira, which is very much about music, it's about rhythm, ballet, all sorts of things, break dance. This next one was a really humbling experience when I was in London. You'll notice that I'm the only guy in the room there because that's a Jamaican dance hall class in Marble Arch, where I used to go on a Monday evening. Again, because I was working with Paul McCambridge and he was, you know, challenging me because I was strong, but I couldn't really move. I wasn't supple, I wasn't nimble. And going to the Jamaican dancehall class was where people are doing all this gyrating and body popping and all this type of stuff. And I'm there having to go trying to copy the guy up the front. And he identifies very clearly I'm the only guy in the class, and comes up to me and said, whispers to me, you know, you're new here. What do you do? And I said, you know, I was just moved to London. I'm a chiropractor. I'm specialized in back, spine and pain and back pain. He said, you specialize in the spine. You can't even find your own spine, which was a really big moment for me. That was like, oh, fucking hell, just how obvious is that? Yeah, like, can all these people move in their spine really fluently, beautifully, and they're able to control and pass movement around and ultimately have a good experience in their body, led to me exploring and reaching out to other people like John Ewan and Samantha Emmanuel, where I trained softness as hard as I trained strength. And that was something that has developed over the years. And now John Ewan and Samantha Emmanuel are both friends of mine, actually both on our current internship. In the bottom picture that you see there is, in this time, me and Paul were working as chiropractors in London in a traditional way, short time slots, a model that would be, you know, more towards high volume. And we were trying to figure out ways to bring in all the different things. We were reading the research in that time. We did a internship with Ben Cormack. So our mentorship. So Ben Cormack was my mentor for the whole of 2016. One of the most powerful things that I ever did, because having a mentor becomes somebody that you can learn from their experience, you can get their thinking and ultimately develop your own. And it's something that was really powerful and gave me the confidence in that time then to quit my job in London. And because me and Paul were causing a car crash at the clinic by working differently to the way that the principal was working. So it was bad for the clients, it was bad for the business, it was bad for us. So we were applying and trying out things, and ultimately we had to leave. And what I took from the internship with Ben Cormack was, he didn't teach us anything about movement I didn't know. He exposed us to clinical reasoning, to be able to, ultimately what clinical reasoning means is to be able to explain or to be able to defend why I might do a certain intervention. And what I'd find was that all the things that I was doing outside in bringing interventions within my skill set, learning from Ben Cormack and ultimately Paul to develop how to get buy-in to do that, how to defend doing that. So then in 2016, the really fascinating thing that I managed to do was to bring those two early mentors in Paul and Reese together and started a company called Back to Roots. And that was where my early training under Reese was all around strength and conditioning, and with Paul much more around research, pain, biopsychosocial, and all of those things. So those two worlds are brought together to create a company called Back to Roots. And what I realized that it is to be able to deliver the guideline-based care around lifestyle modification and activity prescription is to have a broad generalist approach, to be able to, if I asked every single person in this session, what are your preferences for being able to exercise or move, there's going to be an enormous variation. So if I'm going to try and make myself best placed to be able to create a rehab program to help Meg get back to lacrosse, to be able to help Rachel get back to gardening, to be able to help Owen get back to baseball, the broader my understanding of different types of activity, the more equipped I'm going to be able to draw upon that to create those. And what I learned in making a lot of mistakes around that time was trying to train and learn everything at the same time means you get good at nothing, and you end up becoming very average or poor in terms of our understanding of lots of things. So what I decided to be able to do was to be able to immerse in something for 6 months to a year to really grasp it, and then move on. Set a goal, chase it, bring it into my experience that I can then recycle as prescription in some way. And that is something that I'm going to offer for you guys to consider. It's something I have in my head. I've always got a 5 to 10 year bucket list of things that if I really get the time and prioritize it, the types of things that I want to be able to learn and train to be able to do. I'm going to build on that in a second, but just interestingly from an observation perspective here. So this is 2016 when my two earliest mentors become directors of Back to Roots, and fast forward to 2021, and Paul is the course leader of the Welsh Institute of Chiro in University of South Wales, and Reese is the course leader for the physio program, which starts in 2022 next year. So I like to think that they've had a positive impact on me, and I've had a positive impact on you guys, because ultimately that was what my intention was. I've learned from these amazing people. How do I get more people to have exposure to this? So what did I do then from there in terms of this goal set? In 2017, I signed up to White Collar Boxing. So the entire of 2017 was to source out a boxing coach and to learn to box. And I actually ended up headlining on the fight in Cardiff City Stadium, and I lost the fight. Controversial decision. It's on YouTube. You can watch it and maybe you can score it and see if you come up with a different result. But ultimately, what I took from that was an amazing year of training. That, being able to be on the pads, being able to make fun games for evasion and moving, being able to bring those things into my exercise prescription is something that I took from that. In 2018. I did a coast to coast, which is where we signed up to meet. This is me and Reese and a couple of my other friends across Scotland, 105 miles, which meant that I had to engage in some running training, had to learn to be able to kayak, and had to learn to be able to cycle, and all of the things that comes with that, learning to change a tire, learning how to prepare for going out, and again, broaden my skill set in those types of activities in that pursuit of that. And that brings us on to 2018, which is where I was invited back to start teaching at WIOC. At this point, this is where I was actually invited to do a backs talk. And that's me in the bottom left there. But David Byfield brought, who I think you should all know, brought me, Paul, and Reese in to take over the functional management. That was in year 3, that there was some options to or some possibilities that there was some lecturers that couldn't continue, and that was something that we took on and has grown to the point that you guys know now today. In 2019, we organized, that's me and Reese there again, we went to base camp. So in the pursuit of that, we did lots of training for learning to hike and walk and ultimately outdoor activities. 2020 was an enforced online skills year because none of us could go anywhere or do anything. So I had to learn to be able to shift my business online, and created, as I said, there's something that was absolutely incredible for me and invaluable was the mentorship with Ben. I've created an internship that is currently going for the first pass, and there is opportunity on January for more people. And then this is what people see me do now at the moment, is back to the iron, which for most people who become familiar with Back to Roots is that they see play, they see fun, they see enjoyment, because that's really the point that you joined me on my journey, was when I was in that 5-year hiatus into bodyweight and all those types of things. So a lot of people seem a little bit surprised when they see me doing strongman type stuff now, but for me, that's really going back to what was my roots. That was 10 years of strength and conditioning to get my nervous system back, doing those things. And I'm enjoying it after a break. I'm signed up for competition on the 19th of December, where I hope to hit a 300 kilo deadlift at 90 kilo body weight. So that's a full circle for me to be able to come back to the strength type things that I really started with. So, I mean, my passion for exercise and training has taken me around the world as a chiropractor. And I think that's something that I hope gives some of you some idea, or some, again, I don't use the word inspiration, but if you take inspiration from it, to encourage you to be passionate about exercise and movement, then that is something I'd like you to be able to take, because, you know, to date, and we've only been going since 2016, you know, we've been teaching in Italy, America, South America, Australia, Scandinavia, Belgium. Next year we're in Italy. We've and progressed to, you know, having an influence, hopefully, on all of you guys, in Paul being in charge of the course there, and Reese and I being in charge of the physio one, which starts next year. So my invitation is to share that with you, to give you guys an idea, because one thing that I consistently see when I'm teaching you guys in year 3 is a lack of confidence in exercising and moving people. And that makes complete sense, because often when I ask people, their experience doesn't look like mine. And that is something that I want to be able to give you some optimism around the fact that I'm not a personal trainer, I'm not a strength and conditioning coach, but my experience in those avenues and movement in general is what gives me the confidence to bring to life an active rehab program that the guidelines are all telling us as healthcare professionals now that we need to do. So, you know, learning and having a physical literacy, being and embodying that yourself, we know from other research that that will come through and influence your confidence to prescribe exercise. Research and clinical reasoning came second. I've always found it much easier to give people the research and the understanding when they have a background in something, martial arts, dance, whatever it may be, yoga, than somebody who's trying to read about it or learn it without experiencing it. And experience is something that, if your experience up to the point of, you know, when I graduated at 26, year 4, I had 10 years of strength experience under coaches. If you don't have that, I suggest that you find somebody now to start training under in some capacity. And it doesn't have to be strength work, because a lot of people don't like strength work. So it could be yoga, it could be badminton. I would open that up for you to consider setting a goal within whatever that is and staying with that for 6 to 12 months. Get an understanding of it, and then have some things that you'd like to be able to achieve. Because a lot of the stuff that I put in there that I've done, people say, oh, you're never going to do that. That's like once in a lifestyle thing. Going to Everest base camp. I'm climbing Mont Blanc next year. So climbing is something that I want to bring into my skill set. And it isn't once in a lifetime thing if you are proactive in putting it in and make it part of your personal journey towards exercise and study and movement. It develops your resourcefulness, and it develops your ability to meet patient preferences. And it also means that you don't have to have a gym to be able to work out of if you're comfortable with different types of movement or exercise, like Pilates or yoga, or I'm interested in capoeira, things that are very low barrier. So, I mean, that is about 40 minutes. I think there is my social media and the guys who are in Back to Roots, basically anyone _. You've had Sam chatting, you've had Paul lecturing, you've had me teaching, so maybe you're bored of us already.
Reese is next week.
So Reese is next week, amazing. So you'll be able to quiz him on how much I used to bug him to get him to share all of his wisdom with me when he just wanted to do his job. And I was turning up saying, Reese, just let me shadow you. Reese, let me shadow you. Reese, let me shadow you. And eventually he gave in, and now I can't get rid of him. So it's a wonderful thing to have him now coming into teaching. And we do have an internship now where you are able to learn and spend more time with the things that I've shared with there, which is available from January. So I guess I'll open it up for the rest of the time with questions. And I just looking at the folks who are here. I think Paul McCambridge was here. Is he gone?
No, he's still here, I think.
Paul's still here as well. So cool. That's what I wanted to be able to share.
Hello, guys.
How you doing?
Just looking for my camera. Just looking for my camera.
Hello.
Hello, guys. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, good. Enjoying the variability in the talks as well. It's been really, really interesting.
Excellent. It's always good to hear Luke speak. You know, one thing I'll tell you about Luke is his passion for learning is incredible, and it's just constant. I've got a similar curiosity for learning myself, and until I met Luke, I'll be honest, I've never met anybody that could match it. And then I met Luke, and I think since we've met, it's just been a constant battle since to annoy each other with constant learning. So we're lucky to have him. We're lucky to have him teaching exercise rehab on year 3. So really, really proud he's part of the team.
Have you got any advice, Luke, about how to kind of prepare for like qualifications? Or I know you've been quite experiential with your mentors, but like, do you have any kind of advice for us who don't just want to be chiros, we also want to go into maybe sports chiro exercise?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the entire point of what I want to get across there, is because, you know, I haven't got a certificate to say that I'm a personal trainer. I haven't got a certificate to say that I'm a strength coach, but I feel well placed, as well placed as anybody out there to deliver what I see is advised or recommended for things like back and neck pain in the world. And I'm talking about physios, doctors, anybody out there. I feel confident based on being able to be experienced on making simple progressions and regressions and adaptations for things like bodyweight exercise, for things like resistance training, and how did I get to that point? Really, when I reflect and I now I see the different struggles that students are going through, I feel that I'm so lucky that my early experience was training under coaches and seeing their reasoning and learning from them, changing things on the spot, and being able to get that, almost absorb that by being around them. So that's why my recommendation here to you, Meg, is that you're in what, second year?
Yeah.
Is to say, seek out a coach and train under them. And you're busy, you're a student, you've got lots of things going on, but you should be able to have a couple of nights a week where you are going for your own health, that you're training under somebody. And that is something that I think is probably the most valuable thing that I could get you to action today, is to actually be training under somebody.
Yeah.
That would be my advice, short of saying go and start doing another course on adding all the different types of CPD courses that there are out there on rehab, for example. That would be my best advice, is to get yourself comfortable with simple progressions and regressions in the gym. Yourself being able to get someone to be able to move, again, use your preferences, find what things you enjoy and start there.
Yeah. Yeah, we were going to get some coaching. We both climb. I work at Rock Block in Cardiff. It's a bouldering gym. So we were actually going to get some coaching and just get an MOT of what we kind of need to work on. Have you got any recommendations of anyone like in gymnastic strength training who?
I mean, if I take you back to that slide there, that's one thing. Even though I have actually spoke with all of these people in person and had feedback and worked with Ido Portal, with Ryan Hurst from these guys here, Phoenix Nation, Darren and Winter. I've been out to Australia with them. All of these have online programs, and anything to do with GMB. I think if I could recommend something, and I even took this as a suggestion when I first come in at 2018, to try and get some programs, because I was seeing consistently people were lacking confidence in moving somebody. And it was only really, I graduated with all that experience of strength training that I graduated with, strength and conditioning. When I graduated, it wasn't until I moved to London and I was the chiropractor. And at that point, Paul was still just finishing his studies in McTimoney. So Paul was actually the movement coach. So it was in that time there where me and Paul, we worked in that clinic for 6 months, and I learned off Paul because he was a trainer. Paul is a personal trainer and has been for 20 years. And again, my time around him, I was just absolutely blown away by how he could just calm people down and find a safe entry for a cat cow. In year 3 today, the guys that were in my class, we worked on just putting people in all fours, making them feel safe and start exploring movement, finding a starting point. I learned that by being around Paul in terms of moving, not just myself, moving somebody else. So again, how, if I could go back, it would be, right, how do I get myself around people, learning under people as much as possible?
Yeah.
Cool.
I've got a question. So from a day-to-day perspective, with when you are with a client, is what would you have to walk us through, kind of like, what is your process?
Yeah, I'd love to be able to say that in a really nice short answer, but as you've probably got from asking Paul, that's not something that we're good at. Our business, the business director of our company has been getting us to work on our elevator pitch for the last 5 years, and we're still trying to improve that. But ultimately, in my internship, I try and guide people through 5 R's. That is really what I think makes up the rehab process. And that the first one is red flags. So the triage, as a healthcare professional, we're able to rule out the serious things that could be a cause of back pain. So I'll do a full orthopedic assessment, a history taking, like you guys learn in WIOC, to be able to do that. I spend more time than you probably would with other people, so I don't like being time constrained. So I have more time with my patients. And so that helps me rule out and check they're in the right place. Then we have reassurance. So I will hopefully reassure that a lot of the things that people are concerned about are actually not that important. So then that gives people hopefully some reassurance that they're in the right place, that we don't need to have MRI scans, we don't need to have x-rays, we just need to find a starting point towards their goals. So we're going to need to find some meaningful end goals. Have you seen the viral video of the grandfather that lifts up his granddaughter, the Doc Martin advert?
No.
YouTube that later. It's a couple of minutes. It went viral in 2020 because it's very emotional. But the grandfather he wants to lift his granddaughter up to put her on the star on the top of the tree at Christmas. And what you see is a little video of him finding a way to be able to build up with kettlebell to bend down and pick it up, and ultimately progresses it till the point that he can lift his granddaughter up. And really, what I use that in my teaching is to illustrate how simple I think rehab can be. find what the meaningful end goal is, trust in and embody and embody your belief in physical activity and exercise, and the fact that we adapt, that people will have different muscle firing patterns, different postures, all these different structural things. But actually, if we grade getting going, we can get to being able to do ultimately whatever somebody wants to be able to do. So that is really my confidence. So red flags, reassure that it's probably nothing wrong, then reconceptualize, because what people do tend to have is beliefs that get in their way. Or my other chiropractor told me that I need to have the right posture, or my physio told me that I need to have the right amount of strength to be able to get going, or I've seen a scan that tells me that I've got wear and tear in my back or degenerative disc disease, and these things are going to be barriers. So I'm going to need to be able to challenge and reconceptualize them so that they can get going. And then the final one is resilience. So once we're able to do that, building up someone's capacity to be able to bend down, how are you going to do that? Just as if you're answering that to an 8-year-old, if you're going to build up someone's ability to bend down, Rachel, how are you going to do that?
Ask them how they would do it.
You're gonna, and then once they can do it, if we want them to be able to be better at it,
you work with them with their particular way of doing things.
And we got to bend down. So that's where being able to bend down them with resistance and load is important. And again, that's where drawing on things like I'm doing at the moment, like strongman training, brings in options for lifting stuff up from the ground, because every one of you are going to have to lift something up from the ground, and every one of your patients is going to have to lift something up from the ground. So drawing upon different ways to try and load up meaningful movement patterns is something, again, you're only going to do if you feel comfortable with that yourself. So again, that's a long-winded answer, because some people will come and I'll just give them reassurance to say there's nothing wrong with you, and I think you can get going on your own. Just a bit of reassurance is all they need.
Oh, that's great. I remember talking about bending down. I remember, this was, God, about 12 years ago now, when I was just starting out, kind of starting to get into Olympic lifting, and I was training on my own because I didn't know anyone else who did it. And I was starting with deadlifts, and one of the personal trainers from the gym that I was at came up to me and he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Deadlifts." And he said, "Oh, women shouldn't do deadlifts." And I'll never ever forget that. And I was like, I remember I was about like, but what do I do if I want to bend down and pick something up?
Just where do you even start with that statement?
Women
It's such,
what?
It's such a silly thing, but it's a cultural thing that a lot of females in terms of strength training will fear that they're going to go to the gym and suddenly they're going to blow up into some sort of Arnold by going in and lifting a couple of weights. Unfortunately, it's not that easy for us, never mind girls. So it's one of those myths that is something that we would need to be able to challenge and reconceptualize, because it could well be that deadlifts are going to be very beneficial for building up someone's physical resilience to lift from the ground, but also that's going to carry over to their mental resilience, because their confidence in being able to bend down and pick up something up from the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just astounded, because I'm the kind of person who does a lot of research on things before I start doing them, and I was just astounded that someone who was a fitness professional with, you know, all of their qualifications and their letters after their name was telling me that I shouldn't pick things up from the ground because I was a woman. And I was like,
I mean, and this is where come into a place where you have an evidence-based, I mean, this is ultimately why I can have a really good conversation with someone who is a physio, who is an osteopath, who is a trainer. Is ultimately when you have take an evidence-based perspective, we all have the same access to information. So really, evidence-based healthcare professionals shouldn't look that different. The scope of how we work, okay, as a chiropractor, we might be expected to be a little bit more of an emphasis on manipulation, but physios can manipulate. Trainers can do a manipulation course in a weekend. And so to be able to put that as pigeonhole ourselves as if that is our identity, which probably arguably is as a chiropractor, it limits us from being able to really help or be at the table for one of the biggest problems in the world, that is persistent aches and pains. And I don't think physio, even though they're probably more associated with exercise, I don't think they do therapeutic exercise any better. global burden of disease of back pain isn't improving. So somebody has got to be able to take the reins. And I think that we have the opportunity as chiropractors to deliver active care, education, and all the things that the guidelines, read the nice guidelines and what it's saying for back pain and sciatica and things, and look at that and say, right, that is something that I think we can really be leaders in delivering. But it probably takes a little bit more time and a little bit more effort to individualize working with someone that way than a really nice, efficient, backed up diary of clients in short time slots. I guess you'll have to figure out. I did that in London. Me and Paul found we couldn't do it. So there's a question in here from Joseph. How was working with Ido Portal, and what is something that you took from his teachings that you could share with us? I will share something with you from my teachings of Ido Portal, because he was a great inspiration for me, still is in many ways, but I also am aware of a lot of the limitations of him. But this scar here is something I can thank Ido Portal for when I was training meat hook single arm rotations on the bars that I shared some of my teachings, where I ruptured my pec clean off the bone. That was training under Ido Portal. I don't blame him, but you know, that's just the nature of some of that type of training, and some lessons you have to learn, you can't be told. But he's been a great inspiration for me because he married up gymnastic strength training and a very innovative approach to play, which is drawn from circus and ultimately capoeira, which when I first got exposed to Ido, I was deeply fascinated by how people who do capoeira move, which is how Ido is inspired by capoeira. And that's where I practice now in Cardiff under Master Claudio every Wednesday by Cardiff Harbour, and we by the government building there, the Senedd, and it's amazing. We turn up and we train lots of amazing movement, partner work, instruments, rhythm, learning language, all the things that Paul mentioned about learning. There is not enough lifetimes to master the things that are in capoeira. So I guess I can thank Ido for really nudging me towards capoeira. I don't think I've come across in everything that I've put on there and the things that I've seen anything as close to a one-stop shop of a biopsychosocial exercise practice as capoeira. And that's a bold statement that could probably be debated by somebody, and it's just my opinion. Hopefully that helps, Joseph. Does that sort of answer the fact that you're asking, I guess, that you've seen some of Ido's stuff? So
look, just quickly for Joseph, an even simpler answer than that, Joseph. He's incredibly strict. He will ask for videos of your movements like a push-up, and you will do the best push-up in the world, and Ido will email you back and say, no good, and that's it. So he's quite a strict coach.
On to that front there, Paul actually did have one-to-one training with Ido before I even met Paul. So Paul has got more firsthand. I've trained with Ido as well, but yeah.
Can you hear me well enough?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool to see that there's professors that we have in our own university that have trained with Ido Portal. Like, I've been watching his videos and inspiring myself off of him for the past couple of years with a bunch of things. I mean, I don't practice movement as he does. I kind of wish I did, but I just don't find places in time, but maybe I just haven't looked hard enough. But I've a couple years ago when I was playing rugby, I dislocated my collarbone, my clavicle at the I forget the name for it, but the sternum and clavicular
SC joint. That's just short of that.
Sorry, SC joint. I was having a blank there. And yeah, and I just been having clicking and not pain, but I feel like restriction in that joint ever since. And it also affected my AC joint. And I just wanted to know if there were any exercises that you'd recommend maybe to get that strength off of it? Because I see that you've injured your pec. I know it's a different muscle, but it's kind of the same region, kind of over to the bicipital
Yeah.
groove.
I think the shortest answer I can give there, short of I can't really comment without assessing you and seeing you and testing you, is like I said with what I really learned firsthand with Reese, was being able to train around the injury, get the general benefits of things like descending inhibition. If that's something you're not familiar with, that's basically aerobic exercise, that runner's high that you all get when you're stressed as fuck with exams and things like this. There's a physiological mechanism there that causes or stimulates the internal drug cabinet in our brain. Endorphins are what trickle down the spinal column to prevent nociception from synapsing and passing up and then going on to potentially be a pain experience. So start off by training around your SC joints, take out the provocative things, get yourself fit and healthy, training aerobic exercise, train your lower body, train the other arm. If you train the other arm or the other shoulder, you can get something called the crossover education effect, which means that a big part of strength is in the brain, like pain. Strength is an output, pain is an output. And if you train your other side, you will get the benefit of training of an output to the injured side, and then just gradually get going by exposing your shoulder to ranges of movement that you need for whatever it is you want to do. And that would be a loose guideline around how I would go with exercise prescription for what you just suggested there, short of knowing the specifics of working with you individually. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Joel's Simo, I can't pronounce your name, I'm so sorry. Joel has his hand up. Hi, sorry, how do you pronounce your name?
However you want it to be pronounced, really.
I think it's just turned into a dating room.
Anyway, Luke, I wanted to ask you about, we hear a lot from you about rehab and stuff, and that just gets me curious between all of our other subjects on how much of the diagnosis and neurology side of things you go on. Because from what I got from your talk, basically, is that you took each skill and you tried to hone it for, just focus on one thing and master it for as long as you can for a short period of time, and then start maxing out each one. But yeah, I've just been curious to know how much of diagnostics, neurological exams you do.
Yeah, so me and Paul were talking about this earlier. I sometimes cover the neurology in year 3, and I think that whilst research comes and goes, things like orthopedic tests, things like support for healthcare models, changes and updates, one thing that isn't going to change is a really thorough neurology exam. And that's something that I do with every person to be able to, reflexes and doing accurate reflexes. We're not going to suddenly see a research paper that says that that's no longer telling us that there's a compromised nerve root. Okay, so a thorough neurology exam is something that is incredibly powerful and valuable that you learn at WIOC, and you will do that with your patient assessment. So the answer to that is every person would get a neurology assessment that I would work with to do that first part I said before, red flag triage, to rule out that this isn't a nerve root issue that is in the 5 to 10% of neck and back pain. That is your sciatica or your radiculopathy. Okay, so that's the answer to the neurology. I don't do functional neurology, if that's something that you are referring to, which you may have other speakers talk about, to be able to try and influence parts of the brain with applied kinesiology and things like this. So I don't do any of that. And was there something else to your question?
About diagnosis, basically, on instead of just skeletal muscular function as well as the tangential other things that we learn about, like function of the diaphragm and GI tract conditions, all sorts of things. Just how much care do you put into that compared to the rehab?
Okay, I'm not 100% clear on your question, but I'll try and answer. I believe our scope as healthcare professionals is to be world leaders in musculoskeletal conditions.
Mhm.
So if someone's coming with shoulder pain, with a shoulder injury, someone's coming with back pain or a back injury, those aren't the same, back pain and back injury, often completely mutually exclusive. And in fact, the management of back pain is often very different to a management for back injury. And that is something that I would work in making a diagnosis of that and putting a plan of management together to help that person to be able to get appropriate care. Sometimes that might be a scan and then medical care. Often, the vast majority, it should be you're in the right place to have a conservative biopsychosocial approach, which would include education. Reassurance could include manual therapy, like manipulation or massage. Should be goal setting, should be pacing and slowing down the things that someone's doing too much of, and grading the exposure to things that they're avoiding. Those are the things of what really will make up an effective package of care. If someone's talking about other things like, you mentioned the diaphragm there, that would be not something that I typically attract.
Yeah, you seem to be very, very focused on rehab, and it really does make sense. So in about the early start of your career, you mentioned CrossFit, and you mentioned the CrossFit gym, and I'm just curious on your opinion on CrossFit, because it's just dubious topic we get on and off here.
Love it. Love CrossFit. It can be done very badly, and that is what is the confusion, because I think if we look at what the basis of CrossFit is, and this, when I trained at CrossFit, and I've done plenty of CrossFit competitions, it marries up metabolic conditioning, gymnastic strength training, and weightlifting. What an amazing trio. And then what they really get well with CrossFit is the community, the sense of being. It's where my fascination for diet really got born out, and I become really obsessed with the paleo diet. When I was in your guys' position, I didn't eat something unless it could be killed or grew. And I then, one of the names was on the start of this, if I bring you right back to the start of this here, this is Advanced Personal Training Science to Practice. So the chapter 4 here, Alan Aragon's probably a name every one of you wants to write down. He is the evidence-based distributor of myth busting within diet and nutrition, and he blasted my early dreams around the paleo diet being the way to eat, but it still is where I built the foundations of how I currently eat. Deviate from it just to be able to manage calories, because that is the most important thing. But CrossFit, I think it's fantastic. What a lot of people miss with CrossFit is the people who are all at the games, all on performance enhancing drugs. They are specialists in, that's a global sweeping statement, but I'll leave you to make your own opinion on that. But it is, they are training specialists in weightlifting. They are training specialists in metabolic conditioning, specialists in gymnastic bodyweight work, and then they come together and compete. What a lot of people miss there is they train CrossFit by literally doing CrossFit the whole time, which is then a lot of complex movements under fatigue and ultimately a high risk of injury. So that can be the limitation of it. And I think the answer to that is, can chiropractic be done well? Can it be done poor? Can medicine be done well? Can it be done poor? Can CrossFit be done well? Can it be done poor?
All right, that's exciting, because CrossFit is such a new thing, and nutrition as well. Both of them we got them mentioned in public health last year, and just from what I got, because we have to be relatively careful in a university course, all we learned about both of them was they exist, and you can look into government guidelines for it. You're not going to find much. And so when I hear about one of our lecturers knowing a lot and being into both of those topics, it really does make me curious to know more about it from you.
Super. And the best thing that I could suggest to you would be to go down to CrossFit Caerphilly. It's 10 minutes from Treforest. And on a Wednesday is when Rhys Shawnee coaches. And when Rhys Shawnee coaches, he programs in a really well managed, his load management and the things that he programs for people to be able to do is based on his understanding of good, sound strength and conditioning principles. So again, I can't force anybody, apart from maybe if you take inspiration from this class, to go and train down there on a Wednesday. The other coaches there, Bubba and Louis, Bubba and Sarah Lowe's, they are all great coaches as well. So outside the course, again, that is where you're going to get the time in exercise, in movement, that then will give you confidence to come up in how you can bring that into helping someone when you're in clinic and when you're working to guide someone towards active care.
All right, thank you. I'll stop talking
Michelle's
you
got
now.
a hand up.
Oh, I've lost my icon bar, so go for it.
Hello. So for me, I'm curious to know about how you balance your time, because you've tried so many different methods of training. You're doing a strongman training at the moment, but you're still like you've got your finger in lots of different pies. Partly, I want to know how you prioritize that. So, has there ever been a time where you go, business and work is going to take a bit of a hit because I want to learn this, which I can bring into work, but also for myself, like my mental well-being as well. Kind of because this means you seem in a really good way. You're so busy. How you manage it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I set up Back to Roots, I wanted to ensure that I prioritized, because, you know, if you've got a cup, I've got a cup here. If you've got a cup and you fill it with your, you know, business, fill it with your relationship, fill it with your travel, fill it with, ultimately it will fill up. So if I don't prioritize and really make time for my training, then it will get compromised. So I have to program it in as important as anything else. And I know, and I learned from when I retired from rugby when I was 26, and I moved to London, which is when I first met Paul, was I lost my identity. My identity up to that point was I'm a rugby player, yet nobody now knows me as a rugby player. No one has a clue who I am or even cares who I am. And I don't have a reason to train. I don't have people setting goals for me to get back to be training. It got me into low mood, and I would say merging towards depression, not clinical to the point where I was diagnosed or anything, but I definitely was not me. And in that process, I learned that it's central to my core well-being that I train. And it's training, not exercising. I can't exercise. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand. The difference between exercise and training is goal directed, is training, and exercise is exercising for the sake of health benefits or doing something just to be able to be in a class or something like this. And I've tried that. I cannot do it. I have to be goal driven for me. And which is why then I would put on classes and invite people to train with me.
Right.
So I would be in the time when I wanted to immerse in flexibility. I wanted to learn how to stretch properly. I wanted to understand the science of stretching. I wanted to be able to know how to progress and regress. I would put on classes, and Paul will know that this is true because he used to come to them, and I would charge people to come and train with me when I would stretch, but then I would also be getting people to be able to join in. So they would, and what I found was that when people see me anguishing and pushing myself and in the discomfort, that rather than me just standing and doing it to them, it increased the buy-in, and people were like, well, fucking hell, that's how he does it. So this is maybe, you know, part of the process. And I'm not advocating that it should be painful, but in terms of really stretching hard for some of the goals I had a few years ago, you have to spend a lot of time on end ranges to be able to work on these things. So balancing time is going to be important, Michelle, when you are programming in how you structure your time, because that's one way I did it, because I found, yeah, unless I start to marry a couple of things up here, I am not going to have enough hours in a day. Yeah. So maybe that helps, maybe it doesn't. It gives you some idea around how I tried to do that.
Thank you.
Huh? Any other questions, or anyone got any things that they would like to ask? Both Paul as well is on here. So Paul is, again, if we were to do a whistle stop here through Paul's experience to get him to where he is today, that would be an entertaining run through. I know it pretty well, and it blew me away at several points. But you know, if you want to ask Paul anything, fire away.
Can I make a comment? Look, just a little follow up onto Joel's question about diagnosis and neurology. You can actually see on YouTube Luke going through a neurological examination with a patient, his 80-plus-year-old patient David Sennett, and there's some positive tests. So whenever we do the neuro tests, it can get a bit boring because generally you're all normal, so you don't see many positive tests, but there's actually a video of Luke. So I use that with students sometimes to show them some of the positive tests, and be under no mistake that it looks kind of precision in his orthopedic and neurological assessment and his ability to make a good diagnosis, that he said originally that this person's in the right place. I can now do all of these rehabilitation things or whatever his treatment plan will be based on a very, very good clinical assessment. So he does the clinical assessment as well as anybody I know. And it's exactly the same stuff that you guys will be learning in the orthopedics and neurology. So that's certainly something that Luke does and does very well.
It's the start point of making sure that you give your best chance of having a good outcome. Because I don't want to have a missed disc herniation or a missed red flag. So the being able against my name, I want people to have a successful outcome, and that's what the question is that we use to be able to screen people and to be able to do a thorough assessment. Increases their likelihood of getting a good outcome, but also my reputation, because other people will hear about that. So again, it's in all of our interest to be thorough.
Well, I was just going to ask, did you do your PT before Chiro or did you do it afterwards? Because like the further I'm getting into Chiro, the more I'm realizing I don't want to work in a clinic, and like I want to do more exercise-based stuff. So how did you figure out?
I was one of the first personal trainers in the world. No joke. Well, personal training wasn't much of a profession in the UK whenever I started in 1997. So I actually got my personal training certification when I was 18, and then I did a sports science degree. So that was maybe at a time when it was only for the rich and famous before it kind of exploded as a profession. And it did help me a lot, you know, because I was working one-on-one with lots of people, moving lots of people. But you know, do you need to be a personal trainer to do that stuff? I think that's what one of Luke's main points, that no, you don't. And I am hopeful that, you know, by the time students graduate, they would be confident moving patients, and especially moving patients in pain, which is what you're going to be doing a lot in your career. So, you know, you don't need to do a PT qualification. I don't think there's any superiority over any PT qualifications. It's not a regulated profession yet. So anybody can call themselves a personal trainer now, unlike chiropractic. So, you know, my grandmother could call herself a personal trainer if she really wanted to. And I agree with Luke's point that I think the best way you can actually learn these things is to immerse yourself in it yourself. You know, the experience of doing strength and conditioning, experience of doing gymnastics training, or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Whatever you enjoy, I think is the best way to learn these things. So yeah, it'll do no harm. If you've got endless money, then of course do a PT certification, but I don't think you need to. And regarding the scope of chiropractic, so, you know, you can sort of see a newer breed coming through in social media, the likes of Luke, the likes of Aaron Kubal, who are showing that, you know, we can do other things. I don't think we will necessarily lose our identity. We're going to be manual therapists. Patients love it. Spinal manipulation is as useful for pain as certainly any exercise rehabilitation. And some patients will want that approach. So I think it's useful for us to be as good at that as we can, because that is a clear identity. But, you know, you've got a passion for movement, you've got a passion for exercise, combining the two, just doing one, etc. You know, by all means, it's within your scope, and in your clinic is going to, you know, Luke's clinic has always been a gym. Luke's first clinic was in a car park, you know, whenever he went back after London. So, you know, that's what he built up. So your environment will be whatever you wish it to be. But, you know, you can still do a lot in a clinic. You can still do a lot of really lovely stuff in a clinic. One of the things that Luke teaches on his course is, in a small clinical room, all of the variety of rehabilitation that you can do. One of the concerns we've had from the fourth year students is that the rehabilitation suite is closed at the minute because of the risk assessment rules in the clinic. So it's purely manual therapy based at the minute in the clinical room. But, you know, Luke said to the fourth years the other day, move the bench across a little bit, you've got space, you can do tons and tons of things in a small space. So I think it's a useful thing to be resourceful and to learn how to adapt to whatever environment. But, you know, create your own identity. You know, you're going to graduate as a chiropractor, but the way you wish to work, you've got a big scope for how that can look.
I've got a question. You said in your slides that you would run like workshops essentially for your year to do with movement and things. How did you do that? Like, because I know there's a lot of people in our year, certainly I don't really know about the other years, that have specializations in different sports or movement patterns or whatever, and it would be really great if we could do something as a group. Might just be me thinking this, but
no, I mean, this is it's difficult for me to tread across the line here of me being a lecturer and me running a private business, because this is where I could deliver all of these things, yet there is a potential conflict of interest around how that's done. To take you back to when I did it with my peers, we had the rehab suite, and basically in my year group there was about 100 of us, and then I just did 6 classes of about, what's 100 divided by 6? 15 or something people in the group, where I would take them through simple stuff that I was at that point really familiar with, things like a hip hinge, things like abdominal bracing for being able to coach a squat or a deadlift, or things like being able to generate external rotation torque at the shoulder or external rotation torque at the hip, general physical preparedness for loading or lifting. That was things that I put on, because generally a lot of guys in my year group were not as comfortable with those things as I was, and just the fact that I was comfortable with those things meant that I was able to give those and prescribe those. And as I've evolved with my different types of exercise, what I found is that my passion, the time I put into it, my interest, that seems to be more important than the actual exercise that I give people. And again, the research shows that there isn't one thing that's better than anything else. So it's our ability to be able to get buy-in, to help someone stick with it, that is probably much more important than the thing. So your confidence in being able to communicate some of the benefits of the exercise, to be able to make it a little bit harder or a little bit easier. So what we call tracks of progressions and regressions, because that can be something like, how do you make a hollow body, a gymnastic core position, easier or harder, right up to the point where an Olympic gymnast is doing core training. And that would be a track of progressions. We could also have a track of progressions for things like flow or constraint-based movement. So so if I was with you, they're now being able to get you to dodge my arm and then dodge this arm, which is getting you to be able to ultimately respond to movements. Sure, there could be progressions around, okay, how do I progress that task? How do I make that task harder and more complex? How do I make that task easier and more simple? So that was what I did in terms of workshops, and just showing some simple ways to make progressions and regressions. I mean, I've spoken with the place that I train now is in Era 51, which is with Gavin Bilton, who's a current world strongman. So when you watch the World's Strongest Man that comes out before Christmas, he is at the top of that. He's someone, and that's where I now train. And he's on my internship. So being able to get and inspire healthcare professionals to draw upon strongman things, training, to be able to help give the confidence for more robust type exercise prescription. But I mean, I've even said to him that, I could take a group of students, if there was interest, down there, which is a 10-minute drive from Treforest, and we could work on those types of things as a workshop. It would just need to be fleshed out in terms of how does that work, because it would have to be a private thing that I do, and that it's something that someone within the students could organize and facilitate. I'm open and I'm able to do all of those types of things. Paul is more constrained because he's a full-time lecturer within the university. So
yeah, I just think it would be great if because I know certainly with this year when we've gone into clinical management, there have been a lot of movements that are very strange to us. They're not things that things like body drops and like just activating parts of the body that you don't really do as a natural kind of thing. And it would be good if as a group we could do something that helps us. It's almost like functional.
I would be able to put on, if within your student society you were able to organize a number of people that wanted a class on, that you could then come to me. Basically, I could create a workshop on anything. And if there's the scope and the interest for you guys to organize, you can come to me that we could do that. That would be cheap for you, that justifies me coming and doing it because there's enough numbers, and there could be a winner all round there. But that would be something that we'd have to probably organize outside of university. And unless Paul comments on something as a barrier to that, then it's really on you to be able to just approach me and say,
it'd be completely outside of USW, and we kind of have anything to do with that. But Luke's part-time, so he can still do his CPDs, etc.
Yeah, that's good. It was just a thought that, like, I know that a lot of people were like, oh god, my legs really hurt, or oh god, my
Rachel,
my pecs hurt, and I'm like, yeah, it'd be good to get some kind of grounding in that.
I'm the biggest advocate of students learning this stuff and being active themselves. So in year 3, we talk about some of the adherence research, and you'll be shocked at the lack of physical activities amongst healthcare professionals. So if you look at physiotherapists in the UK, it's less than 25% meet the physical activity guidelines. So you think if any profession is going to meet them, it'd be the physios, but less than a quarter of them do, and the GPs are much worse than that. And we know that if GPs are not active, they're much less likely to prescribe exercise. And if they are active, they are more likely to prescribe exercise. So I am a big fan of healthcare professionals, inspiring their patients, inspiring other healthcare professionals by moving.
So the girl came running up to get some ice, and I could see the size of her arm.
Oh, Michelle's got her mic on. She's at work. Bless her.
I'll mute her, don't worry.
Oh, bless her.
I was like, yeah, you do.
Michelle.
Okay, I've muted her.
Yeah, no, we can get that sorted. I'm hopefully gonna start doing the park run soon with the Chiro Society to get people moving, do some cardio and stuff. And
space is a real issue for us. It's the only thing, like finding somewhere to do stuff.
Well, park run is pretty.
I know park run, but things other stuff than that. Even like it's especially with COVID.
Community centre.
I was going to say, the local community centre. I think you can use that for free.
Yeah.
This is something, and I can only recommend that if you do that, then you are developing a skill set that you then take out into the real world. Because one of the things that I also have done over the years is put on workshops where I bring in a guest teacher to my community and then sell it for people to come to the class to hopefully find an interesting way to move. That also is a way for me to make money and put on something that people can come to. So that's something that I've done regularly in collaborating, and it also builds up your network as well. So good idea. Just get in touch, and by all means, I've got people who are in this course. You mentioned there about becoming a PT. I think it's your flatmate Louisa. There's people who are on my internship who are students, and that's where we can go much further into supporting how to be able to be an active healthcare professional, where I don't think you need to be a personal trainer.
Yeah, because we're like, if hypothetically, I'm comfortable at work, I have taken people through like the basic fundamental gymnastic strength training drills that I'm really confident with, just really, really basic stuff. Like a girl asked me the other week, I was like, oh, I'm just going to go and finish off with a bit of training. She was like, I've never been over to the gym part. And I was like, well, do you want to come and I can show you some stuff? So that was interesting. So I think I'd feel comfortable doing that with a small group of people, but the only thing I worry about is insurance or something.
Yeah. So I mean, when you're talking about, are you a fitness instructor or something? What do you?
No, but I would be comfortable, like you say, how you delivered small workshops with your year. We used to run a yoga class in foundation year. We're not yoga instructors, but we just happen to practice yoga regularly. So we just decided to just start a yoga group and train with people. How does it work with?
Right. So now I know what you're talking about now. So Yeah, with regards to that, in terms of you just meeting up as a group of students, that's what that is. And so if someone wants to lead that, then they can lead. There's no money passing hands. So then in that sense, there's no concern, because you're not held accountable or liable for that. What I did was I done the workshops as I was a student in fourth year, but I would have been under the public liability of David Byfield and the people who were registered clinicians there then. So that's how that worked in practice. Now I have public liability as a chiropractor, and I also have public liability as a trainer for some of the things that I do outside. So yeah, that's the answer to that.
That's good to know. Yeah, cool, awesome.
Any other questions from guys who are still here?
Crickets. Oh, cool. Well, I think we could probably wrap up there.